this college football edition is Joe Sieben. Joe, how you doing?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. Excited to chop it up again. Two legends of the game. One retired, one going to the NFL. Your man, the Michigan man, Jim Harbaugh. So gives us something to talk about. Had a heck of a run, so we're going to break it down for the listeners.
Yeah, it's been truly a wild last few months of coaching moves. We had Harbaugh, Saban. If you follow soccer, Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool shockingly announced that he's going to be leaving them after this season ends. I feel like I'm forgetting someone else as well. So it's been wild. And obviously, Harbaugh going to the Chargers, kind of expected. It's been rumored that he was going to leave Michigan for quite some time. The past 3 off seasons, really, he's been in talks with the NFL, and he finally makes the move after winning a national championship at Michigan. He spent 9 seasons in Ann Arbor, which is actually the longest he's spent at any one stop. So says a lot for sure. What were your thoughts on Harbaugh making that jump back to the NFL?
Yeah, last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago after Saban, I put it at 50-50 he leaves. I think you were higher saying he was going to go. I had this weird feeling. My prediction was he stayed, just because I knew they were going to throw pretty much everything at him to try to keep him. But, we did say we broke down the Chargers and that opening, and that seemed like where it would be if he did make the jump. And, certainly enough, that's where he went. And not overly shocked. I think I was 50-50 and optimistic he'd stay at Michigan, but not too surprised. I think he just has that itch to get back to the NFL, to take on another challenge. I think there's something about losing to his brother in the Super Bowl back when he was with the 49ers. There's something about getting back to the NFL and winning the big one. And for him, maybe it was he just felt like he accomplished everything he wanted to and set out to do at Michigan. And getting back to this mountaintop and winning a national championship probably made his decision a little bit easier in terms of leaving.
Yeah, and he said that he was on the CBS broadcast on their panel or whatever. They have like 5-6 guys on those NFL panels every weekend, but he was on there and he said that there's no Lombardi trophy in college football, and he wants to win that Super Bowl. So I totally get that. And there's a lot of people out there, rival fans, saying, oh, it's because of the sanctions coming down, or Michigan didn't want to, or Michigan wouldn't give him the extension, they wouldn't give him the clauses in the contract, the protection, which they actually did in like the 11th hour, like right before he was too deep in talks with the Chargers. But it was purely in my opinion, and he said it, like he wants to win a Super Bowl. And it came so close in 2013, and then made the jump to Michigan, a year or so after that. So, finishes 89-25 at Michigan, 60-17 in the Big Ten. Did not lose a single regular season game over the past 2 years. Started out rocky. He finished on an incredibly high note, right? It did start out rocky. He couldn't beat Michigan State, had a losing record against them. I still think he actually finished only like 500 against Michigan State in his tenure at Michigan. Couldn't beat Ohio State, obviously. Won the last 3 years against Ohio State, which actually is the first Michigan coach to do that since Lloyd Carr, who did it in 1995 through 1997. First Michigan coach went 3 or more against Ohio State since then. So impressive. What from a neutral, obviously you're not a Michigan fan like I am. What were your kind of opinions and your viewpoint on Harbaugh's tenure at Michigan and kind of the legacy that he leaves behind?
Yeah, recency bias. It's all about how you leave, I think. And so he's leaving with a national championship and taking them back to the top of the mountain. So for me, I think, and for everybody else, the recency bias is going to be, hey, he did what he had to do. He won a national championship. He was dominating Ohio State at the end of his tenure. But if you look at the body of work, obviously it still was incredible, but it is crazy to look back at his first couple of years. He was on the chopping block for a year or two. He was on the hot seat. And so it's crazy just what he built and the program in 9 seasons. Like it didn't feel as long as that, but he's been there forever. But I'll definitely remember this last season, this team. And I think the culmination of his 9 years was this last season, getting him to this point, winning the national championship, all the recruiting coming into play. And all the off the field stuff, not going to put a ton of weight into that one. I think every program's got something going on, and obviously Michigan got hit by it, but still they won those games at the end of the year and made it to the national championship. So I think for me, it's remembering that and that he beat Ohio State his last few seasons.
Yeah, we'll get into some recruiting violations later in the pod. Tennessee has some bad news coming for them. Had some bad news this morning. Yeah, you're right. He was 2-4 in 2020, winless at home for the first time in Michigan history. I know it was a COVID shortened season, so that stat doesn't really hold any weight in my opinion. But after that season, he was absolutely on the chopping block, and Michigan and the AD Ward Manuel, they basically gave him an extension, but with a pay cut, and it was more of an incentive based contract. Win the Big Ten, win the Big Ten East, win the Big Ten championship, win a national championship, and you kind of could have, or he made that up in bonuses. But Michigan fans, and including myself, honestly, I was not super happy when we saw when they brought Harbaugh back that offseason. We saw Ohio State had that tweet. They quote tweeted like that Michigan announced an extension with Harbaugh, and they like kind of did like a laughing meme, and they haven't beat Michigan since then. But certainly a rocky tenure. You remember the satellite camps, the shirtless picture at the satellite camps, going to Rome, doing all these trips. They went to, I believe, South Africa one year. He is, and I think this is an interesting point that I'm going to make next, is he was one of the few voices in college football that challenged the NCAA or what wasn't just okay with the status quo. He was him and Saban really were two of the coaches that hold a lot, their voices held a lot of weight within college football. They're gone now. And I'm really curious to see who's going to be that guy to kind of take over the mantle and lead college football from a coaching perspective, because we don't have those huge voices really anymore in the sport with Harbaugh and Saban leaving this offseason.
I mean, he's such a character. So at least he's not retiring anything. He's staying within the game and going to the NFL. But he just does things his own way. And he's just got this charisma about him, this personality. He doesn't care what other people are thinking. But yeah, I just love having him around the game and the way he challenges the status quo and just doesn't care. Obviously, it bit him a little bit, depending on what side you're on with the investigation and sanctions. But he's going to find a way to win. He's going to look at the rule book and somewhere like a Belichick and Saban, if they find those little spots in the rule book, where can they bend it a little bit and play within the game still, but just find new ways to do things. And his culture with the Rome stuff and all that, he just went about it a different way with his team and building that culture over 9 seasons here.
Yeah, he's a quirky guy, and you kind of have to accept that and be willing to work with that. I'm sure, from an administrative perspective, he might be a little bit difficult to work with. So you really want to have kind of the right people around him when you're working with him. And I think the Chargers are doing that. They're spending a ton of money on their coaching staff. They just brought in a new GM who had ties to John Harbaugh. I believe he worked with John Harbaugh. So the Chargers are kind of revamping their front office and their entire organization around this guy. So there's complete buy-in from the Chargers. They signed him to a 5-year deal. It'll be really interesting to see, where he takes them. He took over the 49ers when they were in a bad spot. I'd say the Chargers have more talent than the 49ers did when Harbaugh took over there. So, and there are pros and cons to the job. Of course, they're in not the best cap situation, kind of an aging roster, but I do trust him to work that out. Especially with that new regime there. And he did take some guys with him, and it is kind of leaving maybe a small sour taste in the mouths of Michigan fans. He brought the DC Jesse Minter. That one wasn't as much of a surprise. Minter was an NFL guy, came over from the Ravens with John Harbaugh, and was going to go to the NFL after this year, in my opinion, regardless of if Harbaugh left. But he did bring, and this was a big loss on Monday morning, the strength and conditioning coach, Ben Herbert. He was a huge factor in kind of revamping this Michigan program, helped with recruiting, obviously, helped with the identity and the culture, and really dominating the weight room and strength and nutrition. And that helped them kind of out physical Ohio State in the past 3 years. He's gone. His assistant, Justin Tress, is going to take over. He's been his assistant for a few years now at Michigan. Herbert was the highest paid strength and conditioning coach in college football. And apparently Harbaugh doubled his salary to get him to go to the Chargers. So wow. Yeah, I know with the move with Harbaugh, there have been a lot of, ripple effects, and he's kind of building out that staff, and Michigan fans are like, all right, don't take these guys, but he took Herbert, which is a tough loss for Michigan.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard for a guy like that. If he's doubling his salary, there's only so much Michigan can do in the AD to where they can go with salaries for Harbaugh, for the staff. There's just a limit they can go to, and the NFL is a much higher ceiling. So, and he was going to take Minter. I don't think that was much of a shock, but he's just looking for guys he wants to bring to the NFL and who are interested. And if it comes down to money, there's more to play with in the NFL at that point.
Yeah, on the bright side for Michigan, you don't have to pay that $11-12 million a year for Harbaugh's contract. And ideally, you can use that money left over to help build out the assistant staff and have a lot more money in that pool. And we can flip it over to the Michigan side now. They hire Sherrone Moore as the head coach, was the offensive coordinator for the last 3 years at Michigan. No surprise whatsoever. He's going to be making $5 million a year, 5-year deal. Salary is going to increase 2% every year with the potential for $3.5 million in bonuses. I'm curious, obviously this was not a surprise, but what were your kind of initial thoughts when you saw that Sherrone Moore took over the helm?
Yeah, and that was my prediction. I said if Harbaugh leaves, I think you go to Moore. You don't interview other guys. You just lock him up, and he's got that opportunity, and he proved himself in the games that he coached at the end of the season. He went undefeated, and I know Harbaugh was around during the week, but he did what he had to do, I think, in terms of being an interim to get the full-time tag when this happened. So I like the move. I think it was the obvious choice. Now it's not the slam dunk. It's not the flashy hire. It's not Jim Harbaugh. So it's more of the safe bet and take a guy on the roster that's been around the team and he's built this culture with Harbaugh. So I like it. Nothing wrong with the move to me. Obviously a cheaper salary since he's never been a head coach. Good move for him. Big time program. Head coach. I think he's ready for it. But yeah, I mean, long term, we don't know. He's never been a head coach full time. So it's can he keep what this team is? Can he keep what Harbaugh's already built and bring that forward and stabilize that and this be the floor and the expectation moving forward? Or does it take a dip because maybe he's not this, on a year by year basis?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a good move in the short term for sure. 100%. It's ideally and hopefully, going to help lock down the current roster and hopefully, less guys enter the portal compared to like an Alabama or a Washington. Because, guys that commit to Michigan, guys that have played at Michigan knew this was a possibility, right? And they love Moore. They've played under him he's been at Michigan since 2018. Started as the tight end coach, then moved to the offensive line in a offensive coordinator role. So he's been at the program for quite some time, 5 years. And he will help that continuity in the short term. Now you're right. In the long term, we don't know. He's never been a head coach. And while he did serve as the interim head coach at Michigan down the stretch this year when Harbaugh was suspended, it's different when it's your show. You're running the show. You call all the shots. Everything comes down to you. He's going to be active in recruiting. Apparently he wants to push NIL harder than Harbaugh did. Now, on the flip side, he's Sherrone Moore. He's not Jim Harbaugh. He doesn't have that aura, I think, that Harbaugh has when, he's one of the few guys in the country when he's in your living room as a recruit. It's like, wow, Jim Harbaugh is in my living room right now. This guy played in the NFL for 10 plus years. He coached in a Super Bowl. Moore doesn't have that kind of aura about him. And the Harbaugh mystique, the fact that Harbaugh was at Michigan helped lure in various assistants to coach under Harbaugh at Michigan. I'll be very curious to see if the Ravens connection continues with Michigan, or maybe Jim Harbaugh opens up kind of an LA Michigan pipeline to help out more at Michigan as he kind of builds out this roster and in the coaching staff as well. So interesting time in Ann Arbor for sure.
Yeah, and I think to your point of Harbaugh and who he can lure in and bring in and the Ravens and the NFL connections, it'll be interesting to see who Sherrone brings in and to fill out his staff, because he's going to have guys around him to help him out moving forward as a first-time head coach, big-time program. I mean, talk about, right away getting thrown into this. The expectation is to go to the college football playoff now for him. And so he's going to have the team around him, the entire staff. I think the big one will be, and I'll let you chat through everybody in terms of all of them, but the DC, who does he go with there?
That's the hot button topic at Michigan right now. Some names that have been floating around: Jim Leonard, Obviously, you're familiar with him, former Wisconsin defensive coordinator, currently the defensive analyst at Illinois. There was the former Seahawks DC, Clint Hurt. He was rumored, but apparently he got hired over in Philly and the Eagles as a D-line coach. He was the name. Internally, Mike Elston and Steve Clinkscale are two names. I believe Clinkscale coached safeties. And then there's the Ravens tree guy, John Egurugu. I'm not sure how to say his name, but he's kind of rumored for other NFL jobs as well. So it's very much TBD. If I had to bet, I think it's going to be Clinkscale. It's going to be an internal hire. And then offensive coordinator as well. That one is looking more like it's going to be Kurt Campbell, the current QB coach, going to get a promotion to quarterback coach, or sorry, the current quarterback coach going to get the promotion to OC. And I think just from a broader look at it, like this is what happens when you're a good team. We can complain about guys getting poached and the coaching staff kind of looking entirely different next season. But when you win games and when you win at the highest level, teams are going to want your coordinators. They're going to want your, position coaches. It's just kind of the way the sport works. And these guys are going to want raises. So, we've seen it all the time with Nick Saban, basically doing it year after year with an entirely different coaching staff. These guys get poached. It's part of football. And we didn't know who Jesse Minter was before he took the DC job at Michigan. It turns out 2 years at the helm and boom, he's an NFL DC. So, I think if you're a Michigan fan or any fan of college football and you're looking at like, oh, we just hired this guy as their OC, I've never heard of him. Give them a chance. If they're young and up and coming, like it could work out. These guys have to start somewhere. They have to be, a coordinator for the first time somewhere, and they got to make their name somehow. So, if Michigan hires internally, I got nothing against it. I'd love to see, and I trust Harbaugh's tree if we stay within internally, because all these guys are going to be Harbaugh guys. So, be very interested to see. I'm not too pressed about it, not too worried. I'm more worried about kind of keeping guys in the portal up at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I'd love if they went for Jim Leonard. I think if you're going external, that's who your guy is. But wouldn't hate just promoting from within. Now, there are folks out there asking, does Connor Stallions have a role in the staff? Not that Harbaugh's gone.
I think that would be an NCAA violation of some sort. Maybe he takes a job. I don't think this guy's going to be barred from coaching altogether. Maybe he'll get a high school job somewhere. Maybe he's got that lifetime Barstool Sports offer. But no, there's no way he comes back to Michigan. Although I saw he's been doing cameos. Guy's been taking advantage of the spotlight.
Cash in, man. Right now, cash in.
Yeah, he's been doing cameo. He was at the Rose Bowl actually, which is kind of funny. Saw that he posted a story. He's sitting front row too. So yeah, he'll never disappear. Also, Michigan, they retained their director of football performance and nutrition, Abigail O'Connor. Apparently, Harbaugh was going after her as well, alongside Ben Herbert. So big job by Michigan. Good job there by retaining her. Obviously, I don't have a ton of insight into what she does and herself, but I just reading Michigan stuff this week. Seems like it's a very good thing that she was retained. We didn't lose her and Ben Herbert, but losing Herbert still sucks. And it's also from a strength and conditioning perspective, I don't know what you think, but strength and conditioning is way bigger of a deal in college football than it is in the NFL. I feel like in the NFL, these guys are usually working with a private trainer in the off season, and maybe even during the season. So out of a role he's going to actually have in the Chargers organization. Now, Harbaugh did take the strength and conditioning coach from Stanford when he went to the 49ers, and obviously that worked out. So maybe he's got I trust Harbaugh. It'll probably work out for them, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I think it will work out for him, but I think you're right. There's a little bit more weight to it, and no pun intended, in college versus the NFL. Just with, their kids, they're on campus, they're eating all the meals together through the program. They're more on a year-round basis versus the NFL is, more in terms of months than a year. And they're off facility, they're not living in dorms and stuff, and they've got their own, food chefs. They'll eat the facility probably a little bit more basic, and obviously a lot goes into that. They've got the resources, but I think to your point, like they've got their own trainers off the field in the off season. They're not at the facility. So a little bit more weight goes into it in college football. So definitely, important that they kept her around.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You got anything else on Harbaugh, Moore, and Michigan before we kind of move on to some other happenings across college football?
No, I think overall I was just hoping he'd stick around, but makes sense. I think he had that itch to get back. It's a lot of money to leave on the table, and I think Sherrone Moore was the right call here. Only time will tell if that's true, but I think it was the right call to go with him. No complaints there.
Yeah, and I'll be rooting for Harbaugh in the NFL. Although I'm not a fan of the Chargers organization and what they did leaving San Diego. I just think that's fundamentally wrong, and I have a hard time rooting for their success. But I do want to see Harbaugh win, and especially if he picks up some Michigan guys in the draft, which there's so many options. I think he'll get somebody there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move into some other news and notes around college football. The biggest one came this morning. Shocking, but also not really that shocking because it is Tennessee. Tennessee is under NCAA investigation yet again for NIL violations this time. They're fresh off an NCAA ruling last summer where they were charged with 18 level 1 violations and fined a record $8 million. That did not stop them. They kept going, and this is related to their NIL, like I said, related to their collective Spire Sports Group. And it is believed to be centered around their star, now rising sophomore quarterback, Nico Iamaleava. I think I said that right. Looked up a pronunciation before this because I when you read the guy's name, you don't know how to say it. So I had to try to get it right. Apparently, and this was in a New York Times article, apparently a high-profile donor used a jet to fly Iamaleava to campus as a recruit. And that is really all of the major information that we have in terms of these specific violations at this point. But there is the potential for the NCAA enforcement staff to charge multiple level 1 and level 2 violations to Tennessee here. Now, it is important to note Tennessee, of course, has pushed back against these allegations. Their chancellor, Donde Plowman, told NCAA president Charlie Baker in a letter that the allegations are factually untrue and procedurally flawed. But the fact that Tennessee is a repeat offender coming off those big sanctions last offseason, they could get popped big time as a repeat violator. And I'm curious your thoughts on Tennessee kind of getting popped here again in the news again in a bad way. But also, like, from an overall NIL perspective, your thoughts on, okay, Tennessee gets popped for using a jet to fly a recruit to campus, but you have programs like Ohio State and like Jake said, using, the GDP of a small country to get players in the portal. That's okay right now, but jets to campus, that's where we're going to crack down. I'm curious. And that's a loaded question, but just your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that is the question: is where can the NCAA enforce any of this? There's no guidelines to NIL. So is there anything, like, obviously the team can't fly a recruit to Tennessee, but is there anything against someone from the NIL collective pitching him and using a flight to get him to Tennessee to pitch him? Like, I don't know. Is that an actual violation if they're not associated with the team, they're associated with the NIL collective?
Right. I couldn't tell you.
So it seems like, there's a gray area in the whole thing. Like everybody's been saying, it's the Wild West. So I'd have a hard time seeing how the NCAA, they would, because they'll do whatever they want because that's what they always do. But I don't think they can punish them if there's not a rule, specifically saying this, that if it's outside of the team and it's with the collective, there's just not a rule book for collectives and NIL. And like you said about Ohio State, every program is doing something like this, whether it's flights or Jake said, did they give him cash in McDonald's pay? That'd be a great recruiting throwback. Yeah,
it's like a throwback to like 3 years ago.
I just don't think there's a rule to follow here. And there was the Florida State stuff, Arizona State, Florida with Jaden Rashada. So there's just not a rule on any of this stuff. So it's with the collective. Everybody's been saying that they want to get Congress involved in the Senate and figure out how to police this. But without that, I don't know that Tennessee did anything wrong.
It looks like, and I just Googled like NCAA NIL collective rulebook. It looks like there is some type of like rule structure that the NCAA has for NIL collectives. But I'm not going to read all this right now. It's a bunch of legal jargon. But either way, there's such a gray zone, and all of these teams, like we had Caden Proctor, the guy from Alabama that transferred to Iowa, said in an interview at an Iowa basketball game, basically that Iowa called him in the middle of the season when he was struggling, and they were just kind of reaching out, seeing if he's okay because they recruited him as a high school guy. That's grade A tampering. He admitted to tampering in an interview. So it feels like the NCAA right now is just getting schools for the blatantly obvious stuff that they have, whoever, maybe it was someone from Tennessee that fed them this information, right? Maybe like some type of informant. I don't know where the NCAA is getting this information, but it seems like they're kind of just getting schools on what they can for now. And who knows, maybe they'll in 2-3 years, like schools like Ohio State or Oregon, oh my gosh, they're spending so much money in the portal. Phil Knight's just writing blank checks to Dan Lanning to get whoever they want. They just got Evan Stewart, the wide receiver from Texas A&M, and they got Jabbar Muhammad. Who was the star safety corner from Washington, and then he went to Oregon. Like that's going from Michigan to Ohio State. What are you doing? So again, we're going to say like it's just the Wild West in NIL right now. We don't really, there's a lot of gray zones. And Tennessee, unfortunately, is in the crosshairs of the NCAA yet again. And I think if they do eventually get charged, obviously it's going to take forever the way the NCAA works. But if they do get charged here again, it's going to be rough because repeat offender, they were charged last summer and they blatantly kind of ignored that and used a jet to bring Yamal Ayaba to campus.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll be curious what they do just because, the rule book, we'd have to look into it, but I'd have a hard time believing they would just fly him out if there was a distinct rule that they couldn't do that after being a repeat violator. Mm-hmm. So we'll see, but I think the overarching, theme is most of these schools are doing whatever they want in the portal, Caden Proctor, Iowa, all these schools with money, they're just throwing it at kids, and they're doing it within this gray zone of NIL. So I don't know, until there's more policing, but I don't know how the NCAA is going to follow all of it because there was no started. So I don't know where it goes. I think it's just for a while going to be whoever's got more money and a bigger donor base is going to get the better players.
I think the biggest question right now is, will NIL and the transfer portal be in the NCAA football video game this summer?
I think the bigger question is, when's that coming out?
Well, I did see that, and EA Sports officially said that it will release this summer. Okay. It's official. It's coming out. They announced that there's going to be an Ultimate Team mode, so similar to like Madden and FIFA, now FC 24. So it's coming. We don't really have many other details besides that, but you do have to get one of the new consoles, the new Xbox, the new PS4 to play. It's not going to be on the old gen, but yeah, excited for that. I'll be really curious to see if NIL is in that some way. Like, can you just like throw recruits they
just give you a set amount of money that you can like bid on people, essentially like an auction draft. But that'd be sweet. I mean, hey, whatever's in the game, I'm gonna get it.
But then it's gonna be like, because how we run dynasties with like Troy, if it might actually be a hell of a lot harder to develop that Troy
impossible. Yeah,
with like a $40K NIL budget. Yeah. So I don't know. That'll be curious to follow. I am really excited for that game, obviously. Another interesting news story. Patriots receiver and former LSU receiver Kayshon Boutte was arrested over illegal betting at LSU. Felony count of computer fraud and misdemeanor count of gambling prohibited for persons under 21. This took place when he was at LSU playing football there. Investigators assigned to the Louisiana Sports Police Gambling Enforcement Division found that Boutte bet on sports from April 2022 until May 2023 when he was 20 years old. Obviously, that is illegal. You have to be 21 to gamble on games, on sports, and you can't do it as an athlete in the NCAA. He placed more than 8,900 wagers with at least 17 bets on NCAA football games, including at least 6 involving LSU, his own team, games that he was playing in. And obviously this is bad. We don't want players betting on games, but it's just so hard to, in my opinion, to A, police this stuff, and B, like, when you see these ads everywhere, every commercial break, even during the games, they have overlays on the courts in the NBA, on the stadium, in MLB around the stadium. Like, it's so synonymous with sports that now that stuff like this is becoming more and more common. I remember last offseason, it was the Iowa State guys betting on their own games. Like, this is really dangerous for sports in general. And it's not.
It's
not
a slippery slope, and these leagues do not care because they're getting the ad money and the revenue from that.
Right.
But I mean, this guy was dropping like 20 bets a day, dude. He was
Crazy.
all over. You got to respect the grind. He did not care, man. He wasn't like, I'm going to drop one in and get caught. He was like, we're going all in.
And he didn't even use like an alias. It was like a username with his name.
Like Booty, like 7 or something was like the username. So I mean, like, yeah, that's how he got caught. I think it was pretty obviously tied to him, because there's nothing stopping, somebody calling a friend and saying, put this much from your account on it. Like, how would they actually track that is my thing. So there's no way to fully police unless somebody messes up and, has like a username. I don't know how they track it, but all that. So, and the bigger thing is the leagues, the NCAA, the NFL, these partnerships with DraftKings, FanDuel, they're getting all this money and they have all these strict rules on players. Like, I get they shouldn't be betting on, their league and their games, obviously, but I think they should be allowed to go and bet on, if it's an NFL player, why can't they bet on the NBA? Like, I don't know why they're prohibited from all of the gambling if the league is benefiting so much. Now, I agree that they shouldn't bet on their own league and their own games, but they should be able to bet in some capacity, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't be against, I don't know, say Patrick Mahomes betting on an NBA game. That's fine. I just think maybe it's really hard to police that if Mahomes has, he has his DraftKings account. How do you like ban the NFL section of the DraftKings app for Patrick Mahomes? Like, that's hard. I think it's probably just hard to police it, and that's why they don't allow it altogether. But I think it's a slippery slope, and it's a fine line that all of these leagues are juggling right now. Because the second anybody questions the integrity of your league, you turn into the WWE, and the general public just doesn't care anymore. Yeah. The second, back in the day, MLB had a lot of issues like this. Obviously, the 1919 Black Sox. Like, the second you have something like that, it's going to lose interest, or people are going to lose interest in the league because they're not going to think it's legit. They're going to think it's all rigged. And there already are people out there that think the NFL is rigged, that the NBA is rigged. So it's good that, the NFL, the NCAA is cracking down on these guys. They have to punish them. You can't do that kind of stuff. Booty was being really dumb here. And he's probably going to suffer the consequences. The Patriots haven't cut him yet. But we saw what happened to Calvin Ridley last offseason, big suspension, or maybe 2 off seasons ago. So yeah, it's an interesting story to follow in sports right now, because it is synonymous with sports at this point. But I don't know. It's a fine line, and it all it takes is one scandal. All it takes is one scandal, and boom.
Yeah, and it's a bummer for him because, I mean, he was highly touted at LSU and then didn't have the last season he wanted to, but made it on the Pats. I think did he go 7th round, like undrafted? So he made it on there, a lot of talent, but something like this, man, it's tough. Like you said, we'll see what the Pats do, but there might not be any room for error in this area with gambling.
Yeah, absolutely. In other news, moving to some coaching news, Iowa has finally found their offensive coordinator. It took, I think, like 6 weeks, almost 2 months. They bring in Tim Lester. He spent 2023 as an analyst with the Packers. He was going to go take the OC job actually at Troy before Kirk Ferentz called him up and offered them the job at Iowa. He was the Western Michigan head coach from 2017 to 2022. Was fired after the 2022 season, I believe. The move was knocked because Western Michigan struggled with a few seasons, but their quarterback was hurt in one of those. And Lester at Western Michigan, points per drive, pre-2022, he went from 85th, 44th to 31st Sixth, actually. Western Michigan was sixth in points per drive one season under him. And then they finished 23rd in 2021. So he actually really improved that Western Michigan offense. So I don't think this hire is as bad as people were kind of saying on Twitter and all the social media platforms.
Yeah, I think it's a solid hire. Like he's a decent coach, solid hire, and let's be honest, they weren't going to get the cream of the crop. Like nobody wants to go there, but it's Big Ten. It's not it's a pretty good opening. It's Big Ten. They got a great defense, a good culture. They recruit pretty well. If you're a run focused guy, and you think Kid McNamara is a guy this year, and you get a big recruit, I mean, you'd have the tools. I feel like to compete. But yeah, I mean, based on what's been happening the past, 10 plus years. I don't think it was the flashy one. It's not your first choice. You've got other offers, but for him, if you're looking at Iowa versus Troy, yeah, let's go to Iowa.
Yeah. And I mean, from how bad that Iowa offense was last year, you're not going to get a huge name. I wasn't expecting and this is just a random name that came to mind. I wasn't expecting like a Joe Brady, so it could work out for them. Let's read off their schedule here for 2024.
It'll be hard to be worse on offense.
It'll be impossible to be worse. And it's not like they don't have talent, Cade McNamara coming back. So there is talent there. So their schedule next season, they got Illinois State, Iowa State at home. Funnily enough, they played Troy in week 3 at home. That's kind of funny. At Minnesota, week 4, at Ohio State, home versus Washington, at Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, at UCLA, at Maryland, and home versus Nebraska. So it's really that stretch in October where they go at Ohio State and home versus Washington. Those are their 2 toughest games. But outside of that, could be looking at another 10-2 season for the Hawks. Out there,
it always lines up for him. It always lines up for him, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. But I mean, the big thing is you're gonna have to get the special teams coordinator to look at that rule versus Minnesota for fair catches.
Ooh. Yeah, they're gonna have to clean that up, make sure all those fair catches are clean and crisp. And they're not gonna have Cooper DeJean.
They're losing their punter too.
And no Cooper DeJean next year. He's going to the NFL. So interesting times there at Iowa. I'll be curious to follow their offense next year and if they can finally improve. Elsewhere, Arizona, they bring in Dino Babers. Brent Brennan, the head coach there now, he brings in Dino Babers as his offensive coordinator. He was the head coach at Syracuse, amassed a 41-55 record there. He was an assistant at Arizona from 95 to 2000, so he's been in Tucson. Has also been a head coach at Bowling Green, Eastern Illinois. And has a 59-64 overall record as a head coach. Comes in as the OC here. OC or offense is obviously his specialty. So I like the hire for Brent Brennan, getting a former head coach. Syracuse had some good years under Babers. He kind of certainly brought them to relevancy. They used to be completely irrelevant. So I like the hire for Arizona, bringing in a known name as their OC. And importantly, and I don't think we've talked about this on the pod, they kept Fafita and McMillan. They announced that they're going to stay. I think that happened right after we turned the live stream off on last Saturday. So huge for Arizona. Things are still looking up for them next year.
I love this hire. I think it's a great, offensive mind. Syracuse could put up points too in the ACC and at that Carrier Dome. So I love the hire. It's a great one for Arizona, bringing back Fafita and McMillan. And that Big 12, I'll say it every time we talk about a team there, it's wide open. You bring those two back.
Wide open.
If Dino gets firing, I mean, it's anybody's conference there.
Yeah, we're going to be looking as we get into the previews, some of these schedules and some of these teams in the Big 12. When you look at all these Big 12 schedules, I'm like, yeah, they could go 10-2, 9-3. They could win the Big 12 for all we know. There's no Oklahoma and there's no Texas next year. So going to be fun to follow the Big 12 next year. Interesting enough, Kansas today, they announced, I don't know if you saw, their stadium is being renovated. They just pumped a ton of money into it. But it's basically destroyed at this point. They thought they were going to be able to play in it next year as it was being reconstructed. But unfortunately, that is not the case. And now they're going to have to be playing some of their games. I believe it's 4 home games next year, or two or 3 home games at the Sporting KC, the MLS team stadium. And then they're going to play 4 games at Arrowhead. So Kansas was a team that I was high on heading into next year.
I love that.
but don't love that. Don't love. It's not like Kansas had a massive home field advantage, right? But I mean, they did
If
last
they're
year when they were
good, it's a
packing.
big school, and those
Yeah,
kids will go to the games, man. They're not. It's like UCLA, man. Nobody wants to be busting out to the stadium and doing
right.
that. So that's a loss. I don't love that for him.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a sick stadium when it's done, but terrible planning. It was like Vanderbilt this year. Not that it matters, but they were doing
right.
construction like mid games. Like, what's up with this planning?
Yeah, same thing with Northwestern next year. I don't think they've decided officially where they're going to be playing their games, but their stadium kind of going through the same thing right now. So be curious to see how Kansas does next year playing in another state in Arrowhead. It's in Missouri, not Kansas. So
Yep.
Elsewhere, Auburn brings in DJ Durkin as their DC. He was the A&M DC for the last 2 years under Jimbo Fisher. What was the nickname we gave Jimbo Fisher during the regular season?
Jimbo's World, Jerry's
Jimbo's
World.
World. That's right. Jimbo's World. Yep. He was also the Ole Miss DC in 2020 and 2021. And then he was the Maryland head coach from 2016 to 2018. Obviously had some off the field issues that kind of pushed him out of Maryland, rightfully so. And then he was the Michigan DC in 2015 as well. So Auburn gets their DC. And then also Wisconsin brings in Alex Grinch, the former USC defensive coordinator, as their safeties coach out there in Madison. Any thoughts on those?
I like it for Auburn and DJ Durkin. Hugh Freeze does not care about off the field stuff, so I don't think that was much of an issue during the interview process.
It's valid. It's valid.
I mean, yeah, worth a flyer on Alex Grinch for Wisconsin and Fickle. I'm not sure if there's a tie there, but worth a flyer as a safeties coach and just let him coach one unit and see if he can get back to the hype that he had before.
Yeah, I mean, he was in a low place last season, so I'm glad for him that he got a job and he'll maybe get the chance to turn his career around and get another DC job after a couple seasons at Wisconsin or whatever. Portal wise, some notes. We talked about Jabbar Mohammed, the number one cornerback in the portal, going to Oregon from Washington. Also had Will Rogers officially announced that he is going back to Washington. So he entered the portal and then said, I'm going to go back to Washington. We had Washington safety Asa Turner commit to Florida, and the Washington offensive lineman Devontae Caleb going to Ole Miss. So big get there for Ole Miss. Getting
I think another lineman commit to Oklahoma today too.
Okay, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, my takeaway is surprising that DeBoer couldn't get them to go to Alabama. Maybe he likes who's already staying, but you would have thought maybe, especially like Turner, maybe going there. The Will Rogers one, I like him going back. We kind of talked about he was screwed in terms of he went there and then DeBoer left and Milroe was staying in Alabama. So all his options before were probably gone and filled. But I like him going back once, Jed Fish probably realized that Fafita was staying in Arizona. Will Rogers was the next best guy. He's already on campus. He's already there. So I like it for both sides to keep him around there.
Yeah, it is fascinating. You make the point about the offensive lineman and not going to Bama. Like Bama, their offensive line was kind of a weak spot last year, especially against Michigan in the Rose Bowl. We saw how much they struggled. And they lose center Seth McLaughlin to Ohio State, and they lose Proctor Latham, JC Latham to the NFL, the right tackle. I mean, those guys probably would have had a chance to start at Alabama. That is not the case. They took their talents elsewhere. Florida's done a good job recruiting. But again, we'll see if they can actually turn it around. It's kind of a do or die year for Billy Napier at Florida.
Yep. Gotta have a big one.
But a big win for Bama that we do have to note is they retained 5-star Ryan Williams, the wide receiver. He decommitted when Saban retired, and then he recommitted to Bama after a visit. So good news for Bama fans there.
Yep.
All right, you want to talk some NFL playoffs before we get out of here today? Some crazy games last weekend.
Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Taylor Swift are inevitable. I was not on them the past couple of weeks. I did not want them to win, but dude, Patrick Mahomes, it does not matter the situation, the circumstances. He didn't have his best game. They didn't put up a ton of points. Ravens defense played pretty well in the second half, but they find a way to win. They find a way to win. There's just something about that guy, man. He's gonna be in that GOAT conversation if he keeps doing this in the rest of his career.
He's pretty much already in the Joe Montana, Tom Brady level. Like I think if he wins this year, he's past Brady.
this year gets a couple more playoff wins, he'll already be just second. He'll just be behind Brady. Like he's already tied with Peyton Manning for playoff wins.
And he's what, 28?
Yeah.
I mean, crazy. You're right though. Like the Ravens defense played so well in the second half. There were no points in this game in the second half. And it came down to the Zay Flowers short at the goal line, the fumble, that sucks. Like, I hate that rule, but I understand that rule, and I don't know how else you would kind of go about it. So it makes sense.
I liked him diving there. Like they needed touchdowns. He was playing so well. He was carrying that offense. Lamar was not the MVP he needed to be in that game. And I mean, yeah, if he's a second earlier on the dive, he's in. If they don't hit him, on the ball, he keeps it and he's in. Or it was so close. It was so close. So I don't hate that he dove there. But tough. Lamar's interceptions in the fourth quarter, like just forcing the ball, the triple coverage, like it just wasn't like they were in that game. The defense did everything they could to give them chances in the second half. 3 and out, shutting them down, and just came down to they just couldn't get points, and the offense just wasn't what it needed to be.
I don't know why they went away from their bread and butter in the run game.
The ball. Yeah.
I mean, their running backs combined 8 carries. 8 carries. And the weakness of the Kansas City defense was their front 5, their front 7. Yep. Really good secondary, but they're weak in the run game. I don't understand why the Ravens didn't run more. They ran Jackson 8 times. Should have been more. And I think if they established the run game, they win that game. Maybe they didn't want to, or they were scared because they went down and they kind of got away from that. But I think we've reached the point where until Lamar wins the Super Bowl or gets to the Super Bowl, he's going to be known as a guy that's really good in the regular season, but just doesn't step up in the playoffs. And it is kind of true at this point.
I think for Lamar and Josh Allen, unfortunately for them, they have to beat Mahomes in the playoffs to get to the next level. They have to beat him. They have to go to the Super Bowl at this point. Look at a guy like Burrow, who's out this year, but he did it. He beat Mahomes. He went to the Super Bowl. He didn't win, but he's done that. So Lamar and Josh Allen, they have to beat him in the playoffs. They do so well in the regular season and the beginning of the playoffs, and getting the 1 seed this year. They're at home. They had everything they needed, but yeah, until they beat them in the playoffs, unfortunately for them, Patrick Mahomes will be staring across them for quite some time, it looks like.
And he had every opportunity in this game to do it. It kind of just comes down to the question of down 10, second half, do you trust your quarterback to throw the football around the field and come back on a team? And I don't know if Lamar has reached that point in his career. I still think he's an incredibly talented player, obviously. One of the best players in the league. He's going to win MVP this year. But just sucks he keeps coming up short in the NFL or in the playoffs. And that's really what people remember you for. People don't remember, great regular seasons. That's not the first, with Tom Brady, you don't talk about his amazing 2009 regular season. You talk about the Super Bowls that he won. And that's kind of just the legacy you leave behind, fair or not.
Yeah, they got to win the playoffs. So on the flip side, the NFC, man, the Lions, just an absolute gut punch. They're up 17 points. 49ers, resilient, man. They stuck to their game plan. They came back. A lot of big plays in that game. A lot to be talked about with Dan Campbell's 4th down decisions. I'm here for it because the Lions were in this game because that's his MO the entire season. And I get it. There's different with this situation, analytics and that. But his MO this whole year, the reason they got here was because he goes for it on 4th down, and that's just what he does. So I think he did chase a little bit in terms of just having the mentality of going forward and not taking points. But that's what he does.
Yeah, it's what he does. And if Josh Reynolds catches that one 4th down pass, they're probably in the Super Bowl. But man, I just feel so bad for the Lions fans. They were so close. And I hate, it's one of my sport pet peeves when a young team gets super far in the playoffs and they're like, oh, it's okay. They'll be back next year. The 49ers, it was their time. And I'm like, it's easy to say they will be back next year, but so much has to go right to make it this far. You have to stay healthy. You have to obviously win your games. It takes so much luck to win a championship, to even get to the Super Bowl, man.
And Dan Campbell, he knows that. I think some of the players maybe, right after a game don't have that perspective, but he said it's going to be twice as hard next year to get back to this point. So he knows how hard it is. And, what a run it was for them. I'm, happy for Detroit and Lions fans just because they haven't had that success. They had the home playoff games and you win 2 of them, and just a tough loss to go down because it was right there. If Reynolds makes a catch or 2 or something goes their way. The only decision I didn't like and really did disagree with was the third and goal late.
Yeah, that's bad.
And then use the timeout, because I get it. Like, you want to run it, you can score, but I'm like, I think you got to pass, because then you can kick the ball off and hope for 3 stops with 3 timeouts and give yourself a chance. Because onside kicks there's just no way to get it unless someone virtually messes up, because the running start's gone, all that, and blocking and hitting, and it's so hard to get one. So I think you got to do everything in your power to avoid the onside kick and give yourself a chance at a long field goal.
And the 3 timeouts, why would you burn a timeout? It was so bad. You're better off throwing an incomplete pass on 3rd down and then just trying to maybe run it on 4th down.
Or just kicking the field goal almost.
Or just kicking the field goal, yeah. Tough. And, going back to my point, it's like, how many times in your tenure as coach, tenure as player, tenure as a fan of a team will you be up 17 points at halftime of the NFC Championship game? Like, it takes so much to get back to that point. And they are a very young team. Aiden Hutchinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Williams, the receiver from Alabama. Like, they will be back. They will be good. But you have Jordan Love in the NFC North now. You might have Caleb Williams in the NFC North now. You have Justin Jefferson in the NFC North. Whoever the Vikings will be trotting out a quarterback next year, maybe JJ McCarthy. It just takes so much. And they had a good draw against the Bucs in the divisional round, a home game against the Rams. Like, it's going to take a lot for them to get back. Maybe it serves as kind of a TCU game, the TCU game that Michigan had to the Lions, but feels so bad because they were so close. They could taste it. I'm sure fans were like looking at flights, looking at hotels. They were there.
DJ Gardner-Johnson, man, was waving goodbye to the fans in the first half, and that backfired.
Yeah, that was bad. That was bad. They need,
give it to the 49ers, though. I mean, they've actually got the talent, but to come back from that, and I think the biggest thing was stick to your game plan. And the Ayuk play, call it a fluke, whatever. Like, what a play, and it changed the momentum there. And they were still down this whole time, but once they got momentum, they had the lines on their heels, and they made stops when they had to. And Christian McCaffrey, that guy has a nose for the end zone.
Yeah, there were multiple plays where he got hit 3 times, 4 times, and he was still going. He was really impressive. He's really impressive. And yeah, shout out to them. Brock Purdy, he was bad in the first.
That's what he has to do, though. He had a nice second half there.
Great second half, led them back, and I also think this game kind of speaks to momentum, and I have a hard time believing the statisticians and the analytical guys that say that momentum is not a thing. I feel like you could see the momentum in
percentage at like 99% that the Lions are going to win, and it's like everybody knew the Niners still had a chance there, and it was a lot more than 1%.
And once Gibbs fumbled it, I was like, "Yep, they're losing. They're losing." That place was rocking. They go down, tie the game, and it was a wrap from there. The Lions didn't score in the second half, man. Tough. If I was a Lions fan, it would take me quite some time to get over that one. Even if you make the Super Bowl next year and win it, like you're still like, man, we could have had 2.
Yeah. That's it's one they want to have back. That's for sure. They kept Ben Johnson. He turned down the Commanders and Seahawks, though. So that's big for those guys.
Huge. Yeah. I was really surprised to see that news this morning. Who you got in the Super Bowl? Chiefs, Niners.
I mean, I said you can't count out Mahomes and bet against them, but dog, I'm on the 49ers. Like CMC, Debo. I think Debo has a big game. He's been a little bit quieter. Ayuk's going off, Kittle. That defense, I just think they can do more, and that defense can play better. So I'm gonna go against my better judgment and take the Niners.
No, I'm on the Niners too. I think the Niners won't score 0 points against the Chiefs defense in the second half. Like the Niners probably win that game in the AFC Championship game. If that makes sense. Like if they were in the Ravens situation, they would have won that game. So I like the Niners to win, to cover. I like the over as well. I think it's like 48.
Yeah, I like points in this one.
I like points. Should be fun. Out in Vegas, Kelsey will have a game, I'm sure. Taylor Swift will be there. There's no way she's not going to be there. I told you guys in the last episode that we did that the NFL really wants Taylor Swift in the Super Bowl. They're going to do whatever it takes to get her there.
They're pumped up. They weren't mad about the Chiefs going back.
Yeah, it'll probably be the highest rated Super Bowl of our lifetime, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, think of all the extra Swifties, 4 or 5 million people that are going to tune in just for her. So, yeah, I think the Rose Bowl is peak football. I think the Super Bowl has become too corporate, and I hate how they've priced out the actual fans. Like, it's just people that get invited that don't really care about the game. There are some fans that care about their team, but it's not like the Rose Bowl where it's, everyone there just cares about the game itself, and they're not there for a corporate outing. Kind of sucks. But it's fun to it's certainly fun to watch, but the Super Bowl really is like kind of all of these American tropes in one event. Capitalism, corporate America, and all these big, shows and fanciness. Like it is fun, but I think it's a good like microcosm of our society.
But it should be a fun game nonetheless. It's a good matchup. I wanted Ravens Lions, but 49ers Chiefs isn't bad on that flip side. So lots of storylines. I'm pulling for the 49ers though, and I think most of America probably is too.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Not that everybody loves the Niners or anything, but I think it's just that's the better option right now. Mahomes is in the villain era now, man. They've won so much that everybody flips and changes up on them at this point.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're great. It is fun. Like I do like to appreciate greatness. Steph Curry, LeBron James. Like, we don't get these athletes that often. So I do appreciate it while they're there. But I don't know. I've had enough of the Chiefs this year. And it feels like, it feels like it was kind of September Colorado for the entire season. So yeah. We'll see. Should be a fun game. Got a week. 2 weeks before it kicks off. You got anything else before we get out of here this fine Tuesday evening?
That's it. I've been loving the MLB live pods with you and Luis. So I'm excited to chop it up with Luis on our draft preview whenever we get to it. But I'm loving the MLB coming back, man. You'll have to talk about Jorge Polanco getting dished from the Twins out to Seattle.
It's a good trade for the Twins, I think.
I like it. It was a good return. Sad to see him go, but probably the right move.
And a log jam in the infield.
Yep. So many of our guys are infielders, the young prospects, and you guys. So they need room to play.
And you got a top 100 prospect in return for Jorge Polanco. So I think it's a really good move for the Twins. Yeah. Another arm there as well in DeSclafani. So
I like the return. So bittersweet.
And the Twins can win that division just because it's so weak.
Yep.
So they can do it again. Twins had a fun run last year, man.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, to your point, though, it's so hard to get back to that point, even winning one series for him. So gotta appreciate it when it comes around. But yeah, I mean, expectations to playoffs for sure.
Absolutely. All right, excited for baseball season. Hope everyone enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching live, or if you're listening on the podcast as well. Thank you. We appreciate it. Follow our Twitter. Locked In Sports 0, Instagram, Locked In Sports Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube at Locked In Sports Pod as well. Joe, thanks for joining me. We'll be back sometime this offseason in the next couple of weeks as more news comes out in the world of college football. And until then, we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Peace out.